from the QAnon and the chainmail politics, you're starting to see these people go, no, I don't want to say Tucker was right, but like they're starting to come back, and I'm starting to see a lot more Tucker in my feed.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I am so excited for this next guest. I know I say that about every guest, but I mean it for this guest as well. He has awesome stuff on Instagram. We've already been communicating for a little while and just going back and forth with our ideas. So I really value and respect his opinion on things. So it's exciting to be talking to him, especially in a time like this where Trump just gave his final speech. So it's going to be cool to see his point of view on this. So without further ado, James Dunn of the Done Right podcast. Thank you so much for being on here, man. How are you today?
I'm doing great. I mean, obviously we could be doing a little bit better. I wish it was under better circumstances, but thanks for having me on, man. I'm excited to be here.
For sure, man. I appreciate what you talk about because you definitely approach things from a very practical side, and we can get into all these things in a minute, but there's this kind of weird somebody that I know called it chain letter politics that's happening, where people are kind of trickling different pieces of information down through like Instagram DMs and stuff, and it's just becoming this whole this whole kind of conspiracy theory based politics. What's your view on this stuff? Are you somebody that's like, yo, Q is right, Lin Wood is absolutely in the right, like we are, the election was stolen, or what? Are you a little bit less I guess likely to believe that stuff?
So for me, the biggest thing for me is I'm not a Q guy at all. My background growing up was I was a debate kid, and so I was always taught research your stuff, formulate an opinion, know your sources, and read both sides. You're always going to get a little piece of the truth from the left, and you're always going to get a little piece of truth from the right, and somewhere in between the middle is like the actual truth. And I think that's one of the big things that we're starting to see lately with the polarization is that we have two sides of the world right now that are living in completely different realities right now, where the left is living in their realm of what they believe is the truth, and the right is believing in their realm of what is believing the truth. And there's a lot of people out there that like Lin Wood, Sidney Powell, that are thriving off of this and making sure that like they can get their 30 seconds of fame or 15 seconds of fame, and really taking advantage of people and not really considering the damage that they're doing by inciting this kind of like this rhetoric.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I do think that it's very interesting to see the people who have a lot to gain from talking about these things are being way more vocal about them. Your Lin Woods, for example, and people like that. There's a lot for them to gain out of continuing to kind of string along the patriot movement, quote unquote, and letting people believe all these things that have been happening, all the way down to Alex Jones. All people like that. So where is the line? How do you come up with good sources if we can't even trust Fox News anymore? Newsmax is out there now, but they tend to dip a little bit into that whole Q stuff. Where do you go?
So for me, I was listening to Rubin Report recently, and he had a guest on named John Bachman, who's a local reporter for like affiliate over in Florida about CBS, which is obviously not my cup of tea normally, but he said, research things. Like obviously if something's going to be true, it's going to be something that you're going to be able to find repeated. It's going to be a universal maximum of truth. And also looking at the framing of an argument, right? Like a lot of the time that you'll see information that's presented in a certain way. Like COVID, for example, I'm a former EMT. So like one of the first things that kind of bothered me was they were focusing on the amount of positive cases and the amount of deaths that were going on, but they weren't focusing on like the actual statistical data, the trends, to make decisions. So a lot of that for me is go to a bunch of different sources, try and gather the information that you can. It really is hard, and it's impossible nowadays, especially considering that social media and a lot of big tech is trying to censor one side of the aisle, and you're not going to get all of it all the time. I've found that if something spreading like wildfire, you always want to double check your sources. For me, I don't like to look stupid, right? I have a brand and I have a podcast and I'm putting out information. And if I'm putting out information that's wrong or faulty, eventually at the end of the day, people are going to get mad at me for saying the truth. Like I said a long time ago that this Donald Trump thing's over. when they certified the votes. And a lot of people got mad at me. A lot of Q people got mad at me. And I said, Lin Wood was a moron. You shouldn't listen to him. And a lot of people at Q got mad at me. But eventually, you know, when you have these, when you eventually are putting out the truth at a consistent base, people are going to get mad at you in the beginning, but later on, as you start to be proven right over and over and over again, they're going to start to come back. We saw this a lot with Tucker Carlson, right? Tucker, everyone got really mad at him because he shut down Sidney Powell and he shut down Lin Wood at first, and everybody was like flipping out, right? They were like, cancel Fox News, cancel Tucker Carlson, cancel all of this, and they were super angry at Tucker. But then as we're starting to realize, like, Tucker was like, you know, actually having a critical mind about some of these things that are coming out from the QAnon and the chain mail politics, you're starting to see these people go, no, I don't want to say Tucker was right, but like they're starting to come back, and you're starting to see, I'm starting to see a lot more Tucker in my feed, a little bit more, when before it was like, if you share Tucker, you're the evil and you're just as bad as the libs and stuff like that. Yeah, he betrayed us and yada yada. And so I think for that is just like have a consistency and have a critical. It doesn't matter what side of the aisle is. There's times where I looked at Donald Trump and, you know, he's kind of like, I say he's kind of like a grandfather, where like every once in a while from you listen to your grandfather and he's going to say, you know, they're like the Nazis, they're like the Koreans, they're like whatever. And then you got to, you know, obviously think critically, because obviously everyone brings their own bias to the table. And so it's just really just kind of cutting through that bias and finding out what the facts are and kind of making that decision for yourself. We have too much of a problem right now where we idolize information. Oh, did I lose you? Okay, no, sorry. So too often do we idolize these information people that it's like false idols right now, that like everything that they say is truth, and it's become almost religious and fanatic at a point where it's like, if I say Lin Wood said something stupid, it's like saying that Jesus Christ was not our savior. Like people lose their mind, and people really have to be careful with that. Even for me, like I wasn't the biggest Trump supporter at first, and you know, even now, like there's certain things that Trump did that I'm not a fan of, and there's certain rhetoric that he says that I'm not a extreme fan of, but there's things that he does and his actions that I can, and a lot of people need to separate the policy from the person, right? Like once you elect that person, they're no longer your friend, right? They're not people that we like anymore. You have to hold them to a high scrutiny standard. And I think for too long, we've gotten into this tribalism where the reason why our politicians have gotten away with so much is because we've let them slide for so long. I mean, you look at this and I know me and you are both big on Section 230, right? Like for the longest time, we're like, Ted Cruz is awesome, Dan Crenshaw is awesome, Trump's awesome, and then we let them slide on Section 230, and guess what? It's come to bite us in the butt. And so for me, I like to see conservatives lose sometimes, get their butts handed to them, because it brings us back to this foundation. It's just like when I'm a huge Lakers fan, and so like to put this in an analogy, when Kobe Bryant was there, right? We were winning like crazy, we were getting championships, and everything was going great. Unfortunately, toward the end, when Kobe was going on, we were so focused on the legacy of Kobe and everything that was going on. And today, with President Trump's farewell speech, was like his 60-point game, right? Where he got to go out with a big bang and a flash, and it's awesome. But now it's time to like work on the foundation of our team, which was rocky toward the end, right? Our Senate people that we had and weren't that great. We had a bunch of House people that wrote in on the Democrat side that weren't that great, and now we get to come down to these foundations and build it, because we were lacking. We don't have servers, we don't have media, we don't have all these backups that we've seen, and that's being exposed right now. And the Democrats are exposing us. And the best part of this, though, is they're exposing all of our weaknesses, and now that we can fix them. If we get our own servers, if we get our own social media sites, if we get our own media that the Democrats can't take down, we're going to be unstoppable for a really long time. And I think the big conservative revolution is going to happen again, where Joe Biden is going to be a repeat of Jimmy Carter in the late 70s.
Interesting. I love that take. I think, first of all, I agree wholeheartedly that conservatives need a full infrastructure. We need our own infrastructure for everything from hosting to, domain names, all the way down to social media apps, which I think is the smallest one, because without the Google Play Store or the App Store, none of that really matters. We can have as many apps as we want, but if nobody can find them, then they're irrelevant. I think that's such a good point. You mentioned earlier as well about I guess the patriot movement and the way they've kind of fallen into this groupthink. It makes me think of a Jordan Peterson quote where he talks about ideological possession, which I think has happened a lot, in particular to the right, which I don't like to come down too hard on the right because, you know, it's been my home for a little while now, and I enjoy the people there. I'm friends with a lot of people there, but I see it happening where you start to fall into this cult-like mentality where the minute somebody targets the person that you deemed an accurate source of information and you lift it up as a hero, now that person is toxic, right? The person criticizing them is toxic, but really it's counterintuitive to all of the foundations of like conservative ideals, which is like open discourse. You know, we're allowed to disagree with each other. We're supposed to bring up these ideas and battle them out and see which one is actually true and which one isn't. I asked this of all my guests, but I think it's particularly relevant right now. Where do you see the future of the Conservative Party going? The Republican Party, I'll say. Where do you see that going? Do you see there being a separation and maybe a Patriot Party coming out because there's a lot of talk about that? Or do you see it like we're just going to have to play the same old game and really just fix it from the inside?
Well, first of all, it was funny that you brought up Jordan Peterson because like one of the things that's on my desk right now is Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life. But for me, the Patriot Party is the dumbest thing that you can do right now. It's the dumbest thing. And so like and I'll go further into that, right? Like I used to register people to vote, right? And so when the biggest thing is I believe in free markets, I believe in this, and this, and I believe everything the Republicans believe, but I do not like Donald Trump. I'm like, okay, well then here's the best part is if you join our party, you get to vote in the primaries and you get to pick the candidates that you like, right? So if you don't like Donald Trump, guess what? If you join our party and you join our coalition, you can fix it. If you leave the Republican Party and join a Patriot Party, guess what? That doesn't erase the money in the bank accounts. That doesn't erase the infrastructure that they have. That doesn't erase the already good. A lot of people don't realize a lot goes into a party, right? Like you need to have a database of voters. You need to have information. There's years and years and years of work that goes into it. If you fracture the Republican Party and the conservative movement right now, all you're doing is handing victories to the Democrats. That's all you're doing. Because guess what's going to happen is you're going to have a Republican Party A, Republican Party B, and then a united Democrat front right now. And unfortunately right now, our biggest problem as conservatives is that we like to go, you're not conservative enough, right? Like we have like this, but the problem is we are a big tent party, and where there are people that in the Democrat Party that are feeling lost right now, because the difference between the conservatives and the liberals is the conservatives have this platform, and it's like basically if you agree with most of this stuff, you can come join us. The liberal platform right now is if you don't believe in any of these things, like one thing, like if you're pro-life Democrat, there's no room for you in the Democrat Party. And unfortunately, when we do things like that, we are really alienating the moderates that we gained through Donald Trump.
I agree.
And I think the biggest thing that Donald,
because I had Luke Negron. I don't know if you know who he is, but he ran for office in Pennsylvania. And one of the things that he mentioned was instead of just having a second Republican Party, essentially the Patriot Party, that maybe there should be two new parties, and it should be Republican, conservative, liberal, and left. Or Democrat, right? I don't know how I feel about that, but what's your take on something like that? It would probably be hard to implement.
It's so the reason why there's two parties for the longest time is because it works, right? Like, if you look at just trends right now, the Republican Party has not won the popular vote since Ronald Reagan in 1988, right? So like, good luck, right? So like, my thing is right now is like, if we don't unite, good luck, right? And the unfortunate thing is you're going to see how rapidly things are going to decline. And I think right now, it's kind of like Kobe Shaq, right? So going back to another sports moment right now, we just got our butts swept in the NBA finals, right? Like we lost the Senate, we lost the House, and we lost the presidency. Kobe and Shaq fought, right? And there's always going to be that bickering, like whose fault was it, right? Like I've seen, oh, this is Turning Point's fault. Oh, this is the media's fault. Oh, this is social media's fault. At the end of the day, you want to have that like united front. And guess what? Eventually, we're going to have to come together, and we're going to have to fix this. And it's not going to take just the Republican Party. It's going to take every single person. We're going to have to go after moderates. Like this whole strategy of winning the electoral college is not, obviously it's not going to work anymore, especially what we're going to see with Joe Biden is talking about amnesty for what, 4 million new Americans. We just lost the election by 7 million votes. So like add another 4 million on there, we're already going to be starting behind in 2024. So like the biggest thing is like we have to unite, and not only unite, but recruit people that are going to be alienated, because there's a lot of people that are not, I think the best thing that can happen to the conservatives right now is give the liberals a chance to mess everything up. Yeah. Like Obama said it best, Joe Biden never fails to seize the opportunity to mess things up. He said it in a more colorful way, but that was the gist of what he had to say. And let him mess things up for 4 years. And so that the problem that we have with conservatives right now is we're labeled conspiracy theorists, and that everything that we say is wrong, and that's not going to happen. Let them do it. Let them do it for 4 years, and honestly, we'll take back the House in 2022. We'll take back the Senate in 2022, and let them mess things up for 2 years and buy us 10 years of credibility.
Yeah, I do think that there's something to be said right now for conservatives to be focusing on the culture war, right? We should be trying to engage every little bit of culture that we can, whether that be music, movies, podcasting, social media, all that stuff. We have to really give people a reason to want our movement to be the kind of the center of their political world. Because right now, like, and I keep saying this on almost every podcast that I do, the left is brilliant at marketing. They're brilliant at it, and they're way better than the conservative party. They made AOC into freaking J-Lo in like a month, and it takes hard work and it takes skill to do that. And if we can learn anything from the left, it's that. We have to be able to create our own superstars. We had people like Dan Crenshaw, people like that they got a little glimpse of it because of, SNL or whatever, but it didn't stick because he didn't know how to fight the culture war. He didn't know how to be the Kanye of the conservative party, and for lack of a better person, I think Kanye is the one that did it best out of everybody.
And I 100% agree with that. And I think this is kind of like going back to my earlier point, where this is where I'm glad that we lost so bad, because now for the longest time, young conservatives have been talking about the culture war. And one of the things I loved and gravitated toward with Charlie Kirk and Ben Shapiro with Daily Wire, what they're doing right now is they're talking about, okay, we can't just dominate, talk radio, because guess what? There's 80% of the country doesn't listen to talk radio. Obviously, there's 75 million people that don't listen to talk radio because they voted for Joe Biden. And so when we have to get back into conservative media, and taking over these structures of power, Daily Wire is doing a great thing. Like they just came out with that Run, Hide, Fight movie, right? And they're getting it. Yeah, and they're getting into that, and they're putting out an alternative. And as a party of free markets and competition, why we just fail to like compete and like we've just given up on every single level makes no sense to me, right? Like this is the spirit of the party right here. And this is giving ourselves the opportunity to prove that free markets and competing ideas will eventually win out in the end. And the best way to do it is do it ourselves.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think it's partially because conservatives tend to be very, level-headed, and they want to execute things with a plan. And a lot of what culture is artsy stuff, right? So it's all about feelings and emotion and bringing that to the forefront and almost getting rid of any sort of rules and saying, I'm going to push the boundaries of what is real, which ultimately gets into postmodernism, right? But, I think that's why we have such a problem with it. But I do think that with the Patriot movement, it's kind of brought up to the forefront artists a little bit. You have people like Bryson Gray, or people like that are very conservative, but they're very creative. And I think we need to do a better job of embracing people like that, even if they are a little wacky, because those are the people that are going to be kind of pushing the way in culture, and they understand the skills that are needed to, let's say, generate clout, what the kids call today. So where do you see everything kind of progressing from here? Do you see Joe Biden doing anything good? Do you think he's going to just open up and let hell kind of come out? Or do you think that things are going to be slow? Because in my opinion, I think Democrats are they won't really do much. They're going to promise a lot of things and aren't going to do a lot of things. And that's just what it seems like. Biden's already breaking promises left and right. Do you think he's just going to go hard right out the gate?
So my biggest thing is, I think the biggest and the dumbest thing that we can do as conservatives is not take Democrats at their word. And one of the biggest things is that they always do what they say they're going to do. always consistently. When I'm old enough to remember back in 2008, when Obama came in and he's like, we're going to pass universal health care. The first thing that they did is they rammed universal health care down everybody's throats. And honestly, I think they're going to do exactly everything that they say they're going to do. I think they're going to let racial justice and social justice slide. I've already seen that, like, this is a platform that they ran on and it's not a priority for them. You can see that by the fact that Joe Biden didn't take a meeting with Black Lives Matter. Right. And that's kind of a thing that they like to do consistently, is they like to exploit a group during every election cycle. In 2008, it was the Me Too movement. In 2012 was the LGBTQTS plus whatever movement. And now this time it was Black Lives Matter. And unfortunately, you know, they always do things like that. And it sucks, because I feel bad for Black Lives Matter, because there is, I would say 80% of the movement is actually a bunch of people that are good-hearted and they want to see good change in their community. There's obviously that 20% of hijacking people, Antifa, that you always hear about. But unfortunately, like, that's when we come as conservatives and go, look what Donald Trump did for Black Lives Matter and all that kind of stuff. But I think they're going to do everything that they say they're going to do. I think there's going to be amnesty. I think they're going to come down hard on the social media. And I think that's going to actually turn in our favors, right? So they're saying that social media doesn't censor enough. And you saw Twitter actually come out today against CNN, and they were trying to shut down Newsmax and Fox News. And Twitter actually came out and was like, no, that's not what we do, right? Like, we're not here to be your talking mouth. So that actually surprised me a lot. Yeah. And you're gonna see a lot of an undoing of all the things that Trump did, and there's a lot of things that the liberal media did not allow to go out of the good things that Donald Trump did, and you're not gonna notice them until they're not there. And it's kind of like with kids with their parents, right? Like, they always remember all the bad things that their parents did, but they never remembered any of the good stuff. And then, unfortunately, the American citizens are gonna be like the kids right now, where they're gonna look at their next paycheck and then go, why is it less? Because the tax cuts that Donald Trump passed are going to be gone. Right. They're going to look at their healthcare bill and they're going to be like, why is it more? Because of all the things that Trump did to lower healthcare costs are not going to be there anymore. They're going to start to see their taxes rise, because they're going to have to pay. The piper is going to have to come for all the stimulus checks, right? Like, and not only that, where they're going to all these states that are going to have to get bailed out, and they're going to have to raise taxes on their people. California is going to have to raise their taxes. New York's going to have to raise their taxes. All these other states that did not decided that they were going to shut down, they're going to have to pay for that eventually, and they're going to have to come to the federal government, and they're going to start to see that. And I think the American people aren't stupid, right? You can't pull this off of them for a long time. Abraham Lincoln said, "You can fool some of the people some of the time, but you can't fool all the people all the time." And eventually everyone's going to see this, right? So, I mean, eventually in the next couple of years, I think the next 2 years, they're going to do everything. They're going to ram everything that they can down. I think they're going to try and stack the courts. I think they're going to try and do constitutional amendments to electoral college and things like that. And it's going to be a huge backlash in 2022.
Wow. Yeah, I think you're right. I'm surprised now, looking back on it and thinking about it, how much Democrats really do kind of stick to their word. So you're definitely right about that. I want to talk about censorship a little bit, because I know that's something we're kind of passionate about. I'm seeing a lot of new apps coming out all of a sudden, and I'm seeing kind of like a new competition that wasn't there before for big tech, you know, like everything from Clubhouse to Clapper, Parler, which got banned, of course, but all of these apps. Do you think that we're heading towards a digital revolution, kind of like the Industrial Revolution, or do you think that Facebook is just going to continue to swallow up all of these little companies whole?
So my biggest thing is, I'm old enough to remember we had Blogger and MySpace before Facebook, right? And so one of the things that people freak out about is they see Twitter and Facebook and Instagram censoring conservatism, and they have all these new websites. For the longest time, we got very comfortable with Facebook and Instagram because they weren't doing anything wrong. There wasn't an alternative to Facebook, because we used to hear things
doing wrong yet.
Yeah, well, we didn't know, right? People like me and you have been paying attention to this for a really long time, where you look at your insights on Instagram and you're like, why am I down 50%? Yeah. Or like what happened to me, where I was accidentally deleted during the week of the election when I was reaching 10,000 accounts a day. And then all of a sudden I'm deleted, and then the election happens, and then Joe Biden wins, and miraculously my account comes back. So it's waking up a lot of people, and there's people out there like the Korean conservative Vince Dow, obviously you, Ariel is doing the same thing. So like there's a lot of people that are kind of, and people are waking up to it. There's a lot of polling is showing that the social media censorship, honestly, let them do it, and let the free market decide. And honestly, with these Gabs and these parlors and with all these other stuff, you're still going to have to win me as a customer. At the end of the day, I'm not going to go to a product just because it's a conservative product.
I agree.
You're like at this current time right now, like for Gab, I'd rather, Instagram's still so much better of a platform that I'd rather be censored. And I think I'm going to get more, like I'm going to get more out of Instagram.
Damn slow. It's so slow, and it just pisses me off. Like, you're right there. You almost got it. It's just like you're so slow. It takes me half an hour to load my homepage, and it's like I feel like I'm back in 1999. But no, I think you're right. We need to create things not only that are conservative and free, and they champion freedom of speech, but they have to compete with what's already out there, or else you're missing the whole point of this. There is one argument that I'd love to run past you, which I heard on a podcast by a comedian. His name is Andrew Schultz, and I thought it was great. He's kind of arguing for this idea that social media is now the public square, and since it's now a public place, it should be looked at more as like a human right, civil right, than it should than it being a private company, or maybe looked at as like a phone service like Verizon or something, where like they don't get to talk, they don't get to discuss what you're talking about on the phone. You know, like what's your view on that?
I 100% disagree. And like my thing is right now is I never give government power to the government that I don't want used on me. So unfortunately, Twitter and Facebook are going to do what they're going to do, just like gas companies do what they're supposed to do. And they raise prices on people, and guess what? People should stop buying gas. Like there was a conservative movement before social media. There's going to be conservative movement after social media. And unfortunately right now, you're just going to have to ride out the crappy situation that we have right now with social media and start your own stuff. And if you want things changed, start it and put a new marketplace out there. I don't want to see these rules put in for Twitter and Facebook, because guess what? If we go to Parler and then the liberals start doing stupid stuff on Parler, and they're going to, I don't want to see them have to force things that create an Amazon type like hold up hostage situation that we saw with the web services before. I think that just build your own stuff, and if you don't like it, build it. Stop being lazy. Like the conservatives just need to stop whining. Like honestly, stop whining and build your own stuff, build your own platforms. Like the government is never used like for good. So like,
do you see an argument for it being a monopoly and that needs to kind of have some sort of regulation at this point? Or you think just absolutism about the free market, like build your own stuff, forget about Facebook. If it's concerning you that much that you're being censored, just go somewhere else or start another company. Is that more of your line of thinking?
So I think conservatives have it wrong. The monopolies in the social media companies is Amazon. Amazon owns what 90% of web servers. That's the monopoly. The fact that they have the ability to snuff out any competition, like it's more of a business move for them. Like Twitter paid Amazon Web Services a large sum of money right before they kicked Parler off, which there's now backdating paperwork saying that they've known this since November and that they've been given warnings and stuff like that. That's not true. Like they racketeered and they pushed people off and they work together. The real monopoly right now is Amazon Web Services, and the danger that having all these web services owned under one company is going to have, because that's what stifles the competition. Because guess what? Right before they got kicked off Amazon Web Services, Twitter lost $5 billion, and we were actually starting to see the free market work, right? Like it was actually working, and Amazon Web Services stepped in with their monopoly and stopped it. So I think the real monopoly that people need to actually start looking at is Amazon Web Services and their server uses. And we need to start funding and selling server space, because guess what? If a place like Turning Point or my website donerightpodcast.com were to get kicked off because Amazon Web Services has that power to just kick off anybody that they want, like that's where we need to focus our attention, not Twitter and Facebook. Because guess what? They can, obviously we can show that we can compete with them. We just need to have server space to do so. And the fact that Parler couldn't just take their business somewhere else.
Right.
So Ted Cruz had a great analogy for this. He said it was more like landlord. Like, so if you own a pizza company, right, and your landlord came in on Friday and said, hey, you can't be a pizza company anymore. You have to sell euros. And you're like, well, we're not built for that. That's not what we do. And they're like, well, you have till Monday to go find a new tenant space. You have legal recourse to do so. And the problem right now is that Parler was a tenant and they had a server space, and Amazon broke their agreement, and there needs to be legal recourse to do so. But imagine if that landlord owned the entire neighborhood, right? And so like you can't go to a different place. That's a monopoly.
Right.
And unfortunately right now, like, it was a smart thing for Amazon to do, but because I honestly think it's because the conservative movement is filled with so many older people, and they've been pushing the Gen Z people out for a long time. The people that actually understand these problems aren't in a policy making decision right now. And so they're not understanding
in the hearings that Ted Cruz was doing, like they were asking the most basic and almost like goofy questions to people like Jack Dorsey and Mark Zuckerberg. When you log into Facebook, do you have to put it, just very, very kind of juvenile things. I agree. In the case of Amazon, then, do you see there being a place for some sort of regulation or for the government to step in? Because like you said, it's a pretty big monopoly at that point, which I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that's a point that doesn't get talked about enough.
I honestly, I think another good solution that I've heard is if businesses that or states that are rebuilding right now that don't really have an infrastructure for like building their businesses back, like there's going to be jobs that are gone, and they're gone forever now because of this COVID, and they're not going to have the money. The best way we can create jobs right now is like have government funded servers that people can buy with like a loan program, where you buying them and you're creating a market with people who own servers in places that didn't have that marketplace before, that obviously have the space. Like he was talking about, like, imagine having just a giant warehouse in Idaho where like all these farmers that like went out of business because COVID happened and they had to shut down their farm because of COVID regulations or whatever, or like these meatpacking plants that had to shut down their meatpacking plants because of whatever. You can repurpose those to have server space. They're cooled conditions in which that would be perfect conditions for a server space. And they already have the space. They just would need to build the infrastructure and then have those programs bought or like loaned out or with like government funding. Like we did the same thing with eco power, like green power, with like solar panels and wind farming. And it's about time that we start investing in our infrastructure.
Yeah, maybe taking
not only
farm fields that are no good.
Well, here's the other thing too, is this is a national security risk. Like people don't understand like how many government servers are on Amazon Web Services.
That's
like
true.
How many?
That's
and
true.
Like, so if Amazon Web Services get bought out by China, like we're screwed.
Yeah,
like we're super screwed. And so like that's like the military in me is like, how are we gonna let all these services be like the IRS is probably on Amazon Web Services? Like how many servers or like government problems or government programs, I guess, are on these Amazon Web Services? That needs to stop.
It's interesting because it reminds me of the net neutrality debate that was happening a couple of years ago that people kind of brushed under the rug and forgot about. But I think it's coming back to bite us now with this Amazon thing. I think you're right. There needs to be a solution that first and foremost keeps us safe. Because, like you said, I can imagine, China just buying out Amazon and just saying, all right, now all of your information is ours, and that's not really that much of a stretch or a conspiracy theory. It can really happen very easily. So that's great, man. I don't have much else to ask you. I wanted to get your take on what you thought about the president's final speech and the attitude that people are having towards that.
So again, my thought on it was exactly what he needed to do and exactly what he needed to say. And I honestly, that's part of President Trump that I love. And I honestly didn't get to see enough of the last 4 years. And it was crazy because at work today, like it was on the screen and everyone stopped and watched. And they even had some liberal commentators on there that were like, that was probably one of the best speeches that I've ever hear him say. And I wholeheartedly agree. And I wish I would have seen a little bit more of that with Donald Trump. But one of the best parts of his speeches that I loved, and was a good reminder for everybody was he took on the hard battles that people refused to take on for a really long time, like criminal justice reform, like reforming the tax code, taking on big pharma. And there's a lot of money that goes into that. A lot of people lost money because they've had these monopolies, they've had these grips, and they've had this crony capitalism for such a long time. And that those people donate to other people. A lot of people don't realize, I don't know how it happened, but big tech and big corporations are on the side of the Democrats now.
Yeah.
This crony capitalism is now a beneficiary of the Democrats. Like, as much as they talk about capitalism sucks, like they seem to be benefiting from a lot of crony capitalism. Like, how does Nancy Pelosi, who's someone who makes like $180,000 a year, live in like a $15 million home and like have that giant thing of like, these are questions that we need to be asking. And then like the donations that, like, if you look at the ABC, because people don't realize Google's ABC company or whatever, you go on FEC, you can look up every single one of these guys' donations. Wow. And you can see this. And that's something that we didn't have with Donald Trump for a really long time. He wasn't bought. Like, George Bush was owned by big oil, and that showed with his foreign policy. Like, we were at war consistently. Barack Obama is owned by big pharma, and we saw that with his healthcare policy, right? And so, like, for the first time, like, I never doubted the fact that Donald Trump was doing what he actually thought was the best thing for the country. And unfortunately, like, now I have to go back to Joe Biden, where I'm like, okay, who's he doing favors for? And unfortunately, like, that's one of the, like, who's pulling the strings on this? Because it's not Joe Biden. It's not Kamala. And like, as much as we don't like Kamala Harris, it's not Kamala Harris either. Both of them owe a lot of people, because guess what? Kamala Harris is not supposed to be where she's supposed to be at. And I don't want people to take this out of context and say, oh, that's a misogynistic thing to say. Kamala Harris should not be where she's supposed to be at, because guess what? The Democrats didn't even want her. She couldn't even poll within a percentage of her home state of California. Like, nobody wanted her. Like, she's not supposed to be there. So she owes people as well. And so unfortunately, for the longest time, like, this is going to highlight a major theme. That's going to be the theme of the next election. And that's what I want everybody to have in their minds, is when you see a Democrat senator or a Democrat representative or the president come out and say, hey, this is what I want you to think in your head, like, does this benefit me, or does this benefit the companies that own them? And I think that's going to be a big highlight that we're going to be able to, like, exploit for the next 3 to 4 years.
Yeah, and I think we're in a unique place now where we can actually know to look for those things, whereas Bush era and maybe before that, we didn't really know what to be looking for. But I think Donald Trump has brought a lot of that to the forefront, to the mainstream. And now the average person who is never into politics can honestly say, like, all right, I see what Biden is doing. I see who's controlling him. And I think it's just going to make for better politics. It's going to make for better leaders that are more qualified. And I do think that Donald Trump's legacy is going to age well. Maybe not in the next 4 years, but definitely in the next 10 years or so. People are going to look back on his policies and be like, yeah, you know what, he wasn't what people made him out to be in the moment. So I want to put a nice bow on this. I want to give you some time to plug this, to plug your stuff, to talk about what you're doing, where you're going, who you're working with or not working with, and, you know, just kind of give all of your info. So hit me with it, man.
No, absolutely. And so one thing I would love to plug right now is the best thing that I guess the biggest thing that I can put out there right now is conservative podcasters like me, you, and everybody else need to really stick together and bring each other up. I think this, obviously we want to see competition, but one of the cool things that I've seen of the conservative movement right now, and it's happened with, like, even the bigger corporations like Blaze, Epic Times, and Louder with Crowder and everybody else, is everyone's coming on each other's shows, everybody's supporting each other, and they're doing a really big, really big things doing that. One of the projects that I've been working on right now is I've been gathering a bunch of smaller conservative voices that really haven't had their voice heard, and, like, I find on the internet, and I'm like, man, this person's really good. Only if they got a shout out or they got an audience. And I've been trying to pool those resources together and to kind of create our own little bit of a network. Because guess what? If we are trying to fight big tech by ourselves, we're going to lose. I've lost multiple times. And here's the best part is I'm going to start another account. I don't care. Like, I really don't care. Like, I got all the time in the world. I got my weekend. Like, big tech, you're just going to have to keep looking for me. But, like, if we have a network of people, that it's going to be hard when you have an audience that we're all sharing of maybe 20,000, 40,000, you're going to piss off 40,000 people if you delete this group of people now.
Yeah.
And so one of the big things that I've been doing is trying to network people and put them all in one place. And because right now it's been so hard to find conservatives, especially with like the shadow banning. Even if you know the search terms and everything that you're going to look for, like if you go on YouTube and go Done Right Podcast, I've done hours and hours and hours of work to make sure that my search engine optimization is good. But guess what? There's conservatives out there that don't know how to do that. Right. And so like I'm out there trying to show them how to do that. Like we're working with Drunk Politics, which is a smaller podcast right now, Black Friday, and a bunch of other smaller podcasts where you can search them in YouTube and they're not going to come up until the 4th or 5th page. Wow. And specifically on their stuff. So it's like we're trying to build an audience right now. And what I'm doing on my podcast is giving voices and normalizing conservatives every day, because my podcast is not about me. This is the only times when I come on other people's podcasts is when you actually get to hear my opinion on certain things, or if you read my tweets. But when you come on, like I just had Isabel Brown on, and it's about what their perspective is. And all these people have these great perspectives that have been shut out for a really long time. Like Isabel was a campus coordinator for Turning Point USA on one of the most liberal schools in Colorado. And she put on one of the best events, and she got to see the backlash, and she got to see riots and threats and all that stuff. And what a great perspective and what great timing it was that we saw these riots. And then she was able to put in perspective like what she sees from the left and the hypocrisy that comes behind that, and putting it in a normal way that it's not just a talking head. Because unfortunately what we've seen right now is like, I love Tucker. I don't relate to Tucker. I love Glenn Beck. I don't relate to Glenn Beck. And what people relate to is people like me and you, right? Like that they see somebody that is from Las Vegas that joined the military, and that basically I wasn't somebody that had a silver spoon in my hand.
Yeah.
And so like hold on, sorry, Siri popped up on mine. One of the things is providing relatable conservatives, because so many people get turned off, and people listen to people like Alex Ocasio-Cortez because they can relate to her. And it doesn't matter how stupid it sounds, the stuff that's coming out of her mouth, but like there's other people who've been bartenders and they're like, oh yeah, I can relate to that. And like, because they can relate to it, they're more likely to listen to her, and they won't listen to the other side. And so one of the big projects that I'm kind of doing is trying to shed light on more relatable conservatives. I'm tired of seeing Rush. I'm tired of seeing Bill O'Reilly, and like that generation needs to go and make room for the Gen Zs and the millennials that are bringing in basically the life of the conservative party, because this is the youngest that I've ever seen them. It's when I was a nerd and 12 and 13 years old going to Republican rallies, it was me. And then the next youngest person was like 64. So like, this is so exciting for me because we're starting to see younger, and we need to embrace it. If we don't embrace it, we're going to lose everybody. And so like, it's going back to what I was originally talking about, is building that infrastructure so that we maintain all the people that we bring over, that this isn't just a movement started by Donald Trump, but that just this sustains a movement. So if you want to follow me and you want to follow this project and this movement that I'm trying to do, it's donerightpodcast.com. I'm also on Instagram at Done Right Podcast. And then if Parler comes back, I'm on there as Done Right. So
awesome. Thank you so much for coming on here and just giving me your time and your wisdom. I value that. So we'll be in touch. We'll be talking, doing all this Instagram stuff. And if they censor me, I'll make another account, like you said. So yeah, dude, I appreciate it. Just stick around. I'm gonna stop recording and we can chat for a sec.
Yeah, absolutely.